Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the Voice of Reason. Today we are starting off in the western portion of Iran, and specifically we're looking at one of the many Iranian missile cities that exist inside of the Islamic Republic. Now, as we zoom in on this site, again, this is in western Iran. Obviously, you can go in and you can look at this yourself as well. You will see the tunnel entrances here. And then furthermore, just to get an idea of the sheer size and scope of some of these facilities, if you kind of move to the west into this valley here, you can see this is an army facility. It's designated, obviously. And then you move up this little canyon road, and you can see additional construction that is going on. Clearly, tunnel entrance, additional entrances that are either being constructed or have been constructed. I'm not sure when this photograph was taken, or this satellite photograph, difficult to say, but again, you can just see the sheer vastness of these facilities that exist, and this is just one. There are dozens of these all over Iran, with quite literally hundreds of entrances throughout the nation state, and it is indeed vast. Now, will the United States need to strike all of these facilities? Well, the short answer is no. It is impossible to strike these facilities with existing technology that would eliminate some of the structures that have been built inside of these mountains. You may be able to destroy the tunnel entrances, but really getting inside of some of these missile cities would require the use of tactical nuclear weapons. We would need to deploy bombs that could penetrate deep into the mountain and then detonate a tactical nuclear weapon inside of the mountain that could possibly eliminate these cities. Now, my understanding is some of these cities have been, in fact, hardened. These quote-unquote missile cities have been hardened to withstand direct thermal nuclear strikes. Now, would they be able to survive a bunker buster armed with or a mountain buster armed with a tactical nuclear or something even greater? Probably not. But again, right now we're not looking at the U.S. deploying thermal nuclear weapons in this conflict. Now, with that being said, if you are going to conduct an operation the likes of which the United States launched, meaning you're going to decapitate the leadership, you are going to kill senior leaders with kinetic strikes, you are going to launch a massive multi-day bombing campaign, right? Going into this operation, that's what the United States did. Now, what the United States did not do, in my opinion, is adequate contingency planning. They had a fix on a series of targets that included, obviously, high-value individuals that they were reasonably certain that they could get to in these strikes, and that is why they launched this operation when they launched it. Again, designed to kill leadership. And that's what they did. Now, beyond that, again, that is where I believe the United States did not adequately plan. And for me, it again, is pretty nonsensical. Look, when you launch that kind of operation and you, let's say even you are successful and you essentially destroy or take out much of the existing leadership Are you going to have continuity within the government of Iran in terms of the military shot callers? Who are these colonels and brigadier generals? Who are they reporting to? So remember, the United States took out the key leadership figures. So these individuals, these Revolutionary Guards, these Army commanders, Naval, Air Force commanders, had standing orders, obviously, to continue the war if this sort of operation took place. And that's what is a little strange, that the U.S. did not adequately contingency plan for this sort of scenario. And the only reason I'm saying that is the recent announcement of the deployment of these additional resources. And again, are we looking at a ground invasion of Iran? No, we're not. I think what we're looking at is an effort to reopen the Persian Gulf, to eliminate Iran's stranglehold on the Strait of Hormuz. Now, maybe stranglehold is a bit robust of a term, but they do have the ability right now, and that ability is being perpetually degraded in terms of targeting shipping that could possibly transit the Gulf of Oman into the Persian Gulf or the Arabian Gulf. The key objective right now, I believe, for the U.S. is simply to reopen the Persian Gulf, reopen the Strait of Hormuz. And they're going to do that by whatever means that would be required. And again, all probability, that would be possibly the seizure of certain sites and or islands in the Persian Gulf or Strait of Hormuz. Again, the military objective right now is twofold. One, reopen the Persian Gulf, reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and continue to apply enough pressure to encourage whatever leadership right now is calling the shots in Iran to essentially capitulate. Therein lies the problem. The United States and Israel terminated most of the individuals, most of the shot callers. Even the new quote-unquote supreme leader, in all likelihood, was injured and in all probability is not really calling the shots. Now, individuals within his circle may be calling the shots in his stead as he recovers. But there are obviously other individuals that, and what I mean by that is individuals within the military chain of command that were given orders and believe that they are in a state of war and are going to continue to prosecute the war until you either kill those individuals, destroy that command, and or that military asset or unit. And that's essentially what's happening right now. It's difficult to say who is actually running the country. Do they have continuity of leadership? Is there a central command? Is everyone within the Iranian military's chain of command, from the Revolutionary Guard and all the branches of its service, are they responding to one individual? Probably not. Probably not at this point. Now, the United States may say that they are negotiating, and you hear some of the information coming from the president saying that Iran is absolutely looking for a way out of this. Well, maybe certain individuals are absolutely operating and giving information to the White House, to the Pentagon, to the Secretary of State that they want an off-ramp. But there are other elements inside of Iran that are not responding or do not believe that those individuals that may be negotiating with the U.S. are in their chain of command and are going to stop military operations. And that's what happens when you launch this type of operation, and you take out the Secretary of Defense, you take out the Chief of the General Staff, you decimate the entire leadership. So at that point, again, these brigadier and divisional commanders, whether they're for ground units, whether they're for ballistic missile or drone units, at this point, they're just operating off their standing orders, continue the fight, which was probably the order that was handed down at the start of this operation, or just prior to this operation beginning. It was essentially a decentralized war effort based on the fact that it was possible the U.S. and Israel could launch such a decapitation strike, and then what? Then what would happen? Well, this is what you're seeing right now. And again, when the United States launched this operation, once the United States ran out of fixed targets, now the U.S. is hunting moving targets, or targets that are deeply hidden in many of these mountains, and are attempting to locate and figure out, look, do we have the ability to strike these targets? Let's hit them. Did it work? Did we get what's inside of the mountain? Maybe, maybe not. Did we seal the mountain up? Are we seeing the Iranians then excavate and try to basically open up some of these tunnels that were buried by U.S. bombing? And that's what's happening right now. So the U.S. and Israel had all these fixed targets, this vast list of targets that they wanted to hit, and they've hit those targets. And now they're looking for targets that have dispersed, targets that are maneuvering, targets that they may not have known about at the start of the operation. So those targets, those fixed targets, the targets on the target list, and obviously hundreds, if not thousands, of targets were attacked. But what then? Right? After you do that, after you hit these fixed targets, after you've terminated the leadership, and you've struck all these targets that you're aware of, right? Whether they're nuclear, whether they're military, whether they're scientific in nature, industrial. Once those targets are eliminated, then what? Then what? Well, that's the question right now. And it does not appear that the then what was taken into consideration. Otherwise, we would have already seen these Marine units and Army units would have been pre-positioned closer to CENTCOM. Maybe not necessarily inside of Kuwait or Qatar or Saudi Arabia, but at least closer. And again, right now, the operation is going to take the form of reopening the Persian Gulf through military force. It just has to absolutely occur. And then applying enough pressure to the existing Iranian government, whatever that is, to get them to capitulate. And it looks like that There are individuals that want to go after key power generating facilities inside of Iran. There are probably individuals that want to seize control of various islands that could be separate than the ultimate goal of reopening the Persian Gulf, or force the reopening of the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. But that's the conundrum right now. Now, I will say this, and this is incredibly important to understand. The concept of war and the reason you go to war is to compel the enemy to essentially accept your political terms. That is why, obviously, you enter into conflict. You go from talking and communication to overt force, kinetic force. And if we look back in history of when force has been successful, let's say we go back to World War II. Obviously a condition of total war against Germany and Japan and their allies. The United States conducted military operations, both the United States, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, conducted military operations in a manner that compelled the enemy to understand that it was defeated. And how did they do that? Well, they did that through firebombing cities, massive bombing campaigns through Germany and Japan. Yes, the destruction of civilian targets. Cities were firebombed, cities were destroyed, and then ultimately it took the use of 2 nuclear weapons to get the Japanese to come to the table, and then eventually an unconditional surrender. But that is what you have to do. You have to be willing to execute that sort of violence against your enemy in order to seek capitulation. In the era we're in now, it is much more desired for a sanitized conflict. And unfortunately, in a sanitized conflict where you are not forcing your will in making your enemy understand that he has been defeated, in this sanitized environment, you're probably not going to get capitulation. So if you're going to enter into armed conflict, and look, what the United States did at the onset of this operation, going after key leadership and the broad scope and nature of the attacks that took place, it really gave Iran no other choice but to go headlong into military conflict. The only thing that we've not seen Iran do as of yet is the use of a possible ground operation into southern Iraq, and or to expand the war in some way to possibly boots on the ground, quote unquote. Haven't seen that yet. Possible. Will it be effective for Iran? Probably not. But what else do they have to lose at this point? But when you launch that kind of operation that the U.S. and Israel did, man, you've got to be prepared to go all the way. You have to have the pieces in place to understand, look, if we launch this operation and we do what we did, we have to prepare for general unrestricted war. And at that point in time, you have to execute the war in a manner that makes the enemy understand that they have been defeated. That they are going to be destroyed. And yes, that requires hitting civilian targets that could be used for military means, and or using force of violence to compel your enemy to capitulate. That's what war is. And are we willing to do that? Is the United States willing to do that? I think some individuals are, some individuals are not. And that's why we're seeing some of these mixed messaging that is happening right now in the administration. Some individuals understand, hey, look, we're in this now, so we have to execute this as a full-on war. But more importantly, for economic and other means, we have to open the Persian Gulf. We have to remove Iran's capability to close the Strait of Hormuz. And again, very surprised that the United States did not key on this early on. And I had mentioned this, that at the start of this conflict, the only option for Iran to make things difficult on the United States would be to close the Strait of Hormuz. And that's what they've done. And again, right now, the United States is moving assets designed to reopen the Persian Gulf in the Strait of Hormuz. Now, I've seen some analysts compare what is happening now to the Russian NATO-Ukrainian conflict. And what they've done is they've talked about some of the Russian challenges around Snake Island and then the Black Sea. Look, you cannot compare Russian capability in the Black Sea and Russian naval capability to the capability that exists in CENTCOM right now, or could be further pushed into CENTCOM. U.S. surface vessels, the Aegis system on these destroyers and cruisers are much more advanced than the systems that the Russians utilized in the Black Sea. The Russians do not have the type of assets, warships, and the technology that the United States is using right now in this conflict. It's a lot different. Now, obviously, there's going to be some pushback on that as you compare and contrast Russian warships to U.S. warships. Again, U.S. warships are a multitude of generations ahead of some of the Russian capability right now. And you just can't compare and contrast what happened on Snake Island in the Black Sea to what the U.S. could do in the Persian Gulf or the Strait of Hormuz. You're going to see that here fairly soon. And the Iranians, with the use of their own or Chinese anti-ship guided missile systems, are not going to be very successful in targeting U.S. warships protected by the Aegis system. They're just not. And obviously right now the Iranians have the ability to target tankers and other shipping, other non-U.S. shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. But as the U.S. moves more capability into the region, you are going to see the U.S. force itself into the Strait of Hormuz and then ultimately the Persian Gulf. Is it possible you could see a U.S. warship possibly strike a mine or a surface drone vessel or a anti-ship missile get lucky and hit a U.S. warship. It's possible. It's possible you could see that, and the U.S. is just going to have to prepare itself for that eventuality. But make no mistake, the U.S. has contingency planned the forcible reopening of the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz, and the U.S. is going to do that. It's just a matter of capability, moving those capabilities, and then executing that mission. And that mission is going to happen eventually. But that is where we set for today. Obviously, thank you for joining us. More to come very, very soon. As always, have a good day.